thank you to all of you for this film. Julia, I mean, just watching part of it again today, I'm still amazed by what you were able to capture under these circumstances, but I'm also amazed by all of you and your work and your courage and your candor. So thank you so much for being here with us today. I'll start with you, Julia. I was actually going back and looking at our first initial exchanges about this when you first wrote to me, I think 5 months ago. And you were describing the project even before I watched it, and you said that, you know, when you first went to Moscow, it was a research trip. You weren't actually making a film right then, or did you know that what you were shooting was going to be a film?
It was going to be a feature film, and I think my first trip, the first chapter was more of a research film for what was I kind of jumped on a plane as soon as I got a visa, and obviously it turned into a very different film than you know, we had intended to make, which was, I thought I was making a film about journalists being named foreign agents, and I remember even I think it was like 2 weeks into February, telling a funder, well, it might be a slow burn of a film about people trying to figure out what amount of repression they can take. But yeah, the first trip, I mean, I literally jumped on a plane as soon as I got a visa, and I didn't, you know, we talked about we'd do something with Anya, I mean, but, you know, I'd heard you're supposed to meet your characters before, kind of do all these things you're supposed to do with a documentary film. And, you know, I thought I'd talk to some cinematographers, and I just started shooting. And initially what happened was I was going to have a different cinematographer shoot it. I was going to talk to a couple people. And then Anya was having this dinner party and said, well, you know, we don't really know him. Can you just shoot it yourself? Can you borrow his camera? So I borrowed his camera, and it was like people were starting to arrive, and I could not figure out how to use his camera. I'd never shot with a Lumix. He had some follow focus settings. I couldn't do anything. So I was like, oh no, people are coming. What do I do? And so I just put down his camera, and I started shooting with what was at the time a really old iPhone. I was badly in need of an upgrade. It was like an iPhone 10 at the time. And I just started shooting because it felt, I don't know, it just felt like things were happening, and I never looked back. And so I just kept following Anya, and she started introducing me to people. And, you know, I like that first time when I shot Elena, for example, at Nova Gazeta, you know, I came in, and I mean, like, I just had a phone with me, and I was following her around. It wasn't like a planned shoot. Like, I was just like, we're meeting for the first time. And then it just seemed right somehow to keep going with it.
But pulling back from that, like, you know, before you decided to go to Moscow to make this film, like the impulse to make a film about independent journalists in Russia and about, you know, this thing about them being called foreign agents, how did that come about? Was that through your friendship and relationship with Anya?
Well, in the late summer of 21, there was an article that came out in the New York Times, and it was about Russian journalists being named foreign agents and fighting back with dark humor. I'll back up, and I mean, as you heard in the film, I was born in the Soviet Union in Russia, but I left, you know, when I was 9 years old, but I did keep following what was going on there. But there was a picture, I have to admit, of two very cool looking girls in that article, and they looked like kind of like people I might know. It was Olga and Sonia, looking really cool there, and they'd been named foreign agents, and this intrigued me. And I knew Anya, and I said, you know, and Rain at that time had been named a foreign agent too, and I said, well, let's try to make something about this. And I mean, do you remember what, I don't remember what we talked about then. We were like,
yeah, it was like that, and I always had this approach. I think we all will agree here that we got really used to the feeling that something bad is really it's happening right now, and that is going to be worse and worse, and this is a historical moment, and it'll be getting more and more historical. And I had this very simple approach: if you can film it now, if you can make this record now, you just press the button, as simple as that. And then we'll figure it out, and then we will understand what we did and how we use it and what was the lesson and so on. And well, yeah.
And at the time, there were only like 25 foreign agents. You know, there were very few. And it took me a few weeks to get a visa. And so Anya, who knew most of the people or was one step removed, I remember you organized a Zoom call with most of us. And I think you guys all thought I was a little bit strange because I said, well, I want to make this movie. I don't really know if I knew what the movie was. There'd be no reason to make it. And you guys were like, okay. But you somehow, well, first of all, most of the people who are in the movie, I mean, the main characters were all, I think, on that Zoom call. Some other people kind of fell away. But I just have to say I mean, it's going to sound corny, but I'm so filled with gratitude that you trusted me and allowed me to tell your story and to kind of open up. I mean, I have such incredible respect and love. I mean, I was talking to someone, I'm like, I can only really film people that I love, I think. I don't know, I mean, I think there were a couple other characters that I followed. I liked them, but I didn't love filming them the way that I just loved being with you and so that's who ended up in the movie.
I'd love to hear from all of you about your decision to participate. There's such a trust was the word Julia used, and there's also such a sense of intimacy in the films, and it seems like you really did get to know these people intimately as you were shooting. So I'm wondering, if you could say a little bit about your decision to be in front of the camera, which is not necessarily how, as journalists, you're usually on the other side.
The other side, yeah.
No one wants to answer to this question. I think, it was very painful to be an object when you are trying to do your work, you're trying to live your life, and suddenly Julia appears with a bottle of wine and trying to get of you some smart thoughts which you don't have because you're just trying to do your job. But I think we all kind of had a understanding that it's important to tell this story, even it's super noisy and messy, and we're trying to do our work, and Julia trying to film us all the time. I'm trying to pack my stuff, and it's my last night in Moscow. But at the end of the day, it's really important work, I think. So, and because I did it so many times with other people, I kind of had a feeling that I have to do it with Julia.
I just very grateful to Julia because she basically then she made us involved into that project. We all made kind of obligation that we would film things around, film things in our life. And it's not my usual habit. I'm writing journalist, so I don't do lots of photos and videos. And now, because of my participation in that film, I have a lot of videos, like the last time I've been in the countryside with my mom, and how we cook some plov together, or my last day in Moscow. And because none of us knows when we will be able to be home with our families, those memories is all we really have, and it's very precious to have them, and it's also very precious to share them with you, so you will be with us those days, even for a bit.
And I should say at the beginning, I remember saying that I thought that was going to be an idea that people would shoot them. I really didn't know what form it would take. We kind of improvised, and I thought people would shoot themselves. But the only one who did their homework were Elena and Ksyusha, and nobody else filmed themselves. So they said, you did the protests eventually. But for the most part, we ended up kind of going away from that. But even the fact that you filmed it and you have it, like the videos from Ukraine under the text, Elena shot them, and but. We didn't, like I said, we didn't really know what format, and that you have this documentation of like your last days and things that you didn't realize were happening for the last time in a way.
I guess we realized that something important is going on, but we didn't have enough energy to film it ourselves, so I guess that's why I said yes to Julia. And after, it's actually really traumatizing to see this little old me, but I appreciate all of these women who were in this film with me. And I guess all the women who fought for freedom before us, and I think everything we're doing is for the next girls coming after us, and I'm glad that we have all of this shooting and people can know what it is like to live in Russia.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is it's because we started out with Anya to film a different film. Like I said, it was going to be more the film that was the first chapter, and didn't know. We ended up capturing this historic moment. I mean, it's really like a pivotal moment. And I do remember thinking to myself at the time, at the beginning, thinking, oh, what if you could film, when people had to mark themselves, what if you could film in Germany in 1935 when the Nuremberg laws were first passed and, people had to mark themselves. But I mean, we didn't really, like, people had a sense that things were going to get bad, but nobody could imagine. Nobody.
And it's not just about, I think, capturing a historic moment, but I think what the film does is capture history as it is lived by people, and I'm just, that had to do with your decisions to what to shoot. Like, I mean, it seems clear that immediately you want it to be in the most intimate moments in the lives of these people. I'm wondering if you can, was that something that you knew needed to be part of the project right away?
Well, I work both in fiction and in documentary, and I knew I didn't want to make a conventional documentary where there's some, I don't know, some guy usually in a hotel room he's never been to explaining to you something, in a very, that's just not what I do. I'm not a journalist. I am a filmmaker who, I mean, I guess I mostly think of myself as a fiction filmmaker, but somehow I just, it made sense to me to film people in their kitchens, to film life, to film the way you speak to people. I thought it was like you went to visit your brilliant friend in Moscow and she introduces you to all these other brilliant people, and you just kind of learn about things that way. Everything was really instinctive. Like, for example, it's not like, I mean, everything was really, really improvised. Like, it's not like I had a plan, oh, I'm going to shoot Anya in cars as she's driving and da-da-da. No, we were going somewhere like the second day I was there, and Moscow really does have horrendous traffic, and it was taking us forever to get there. So I was like, well, we're sitting here, might as well take out the phone. And then she says so many brilliant things, and so I just kept shooting. It was...
Can you talk about finding the form, because as you said, people probably recognize there's a part 2 coming in the credits. You say that which is called Exile, and I'm just curious how much material you had and why you decided to use chapters, and how you figured out what would be in this part versus the second part.
Well, again, at the beginning, and even after as I shot it, I mean, initially I thought it was going to be a feature film, and then just so much shit happened, and I thought, wow, this is really, it makes sense to have it, to kind of not reduce it to facts and kind of a quick tour, but to really feel this with people. In the first part, each chapter is its own distinct time moment. It's very condensed, like all of chapter 1 is like a week and a half. Everything is a particular moment in time. And then, and obviously the division point between part 1, there is a part 2 of Exile coming, and, it was fairly easy to make the distinction of, everybody left Russia, and part 2 takes place in I filmed, in 14 different countries.
Are you still shooting?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah, because I feel like I want to leave off with the characters as close as possible to when I finish editing. So I either shoot, I shot when Navalny was killed at TV Rain at their new home. I shot when something happens, or I'll shoot when nothing's happening but closer to the end. And it picks up with, we see Ksyusha in Istanbul a couple of days later, and it starts and it goes through a process of everybody being completely disoriented, and then there's more reporting that Lena does from Ukraine, and we just pick up with people right there and go through these. The time is much mushier. I'm interested, it'll be a bigger question, how do we structure different chapters? Because obviously this was it was like a clock counting down. Like, you guys know what happens, but everybody going through it doesn't. But in exile, the nature of exile time is it's indefinite, it's mushy, it's vague, it's suspended. So that'll be I don't know. Mm-hmm. That's a question. But I think we find it in the process. But I shot a lot of stuff, but it's not like there are many more scenes that did. There were some characters that didn't seem worth pursuing. But it wasn't like a huge number of scenes with these characters that I shot that didn't make it in the movie. It was usually a matter of I don't know, we hung out in front of that police station for 6 hours, it's a 15-minute scene. It was and I'm very patient. I just hang out and film and just sit on their laps. And Olga said something the other day, it was lovely, actually. I really appreciated that at the press conference. She said, Yulia was really annoying when we were filming. I honestly, I hate being in front of a camera. I would be suspicious of any person who would not find it annoying to have somebody, especially at a really awful moment in your life, when you guys, the first morning of the full-scale war, I wouldn't have wanted to be filmed then. Hell no. No way. That would be so hard for me. I would have, and you can see Sonia's not very happy to see me, and you guys just want me to leave. But I really appreciate that, you did that.
Just ask one more, and then maybe we'll take a few audience questions. You touched on this already, about saying that it was traumatic to watch the film. I'm just wondering if, any of you want to say more about what it's like to actually watch this. Things that happened fairly recently, and I assume are still quite raw and very much in your lives still.
I think somehow it feels also, it's really traumatizing, but at the same time it somehow feels like freedom and power that we have all of these shootings, and just thank you, Julia, that you were with us all this time.
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm eviscerated, and I am. It doesn't matter how many times I've watched it, on which stage of editing and so on. It's re-traumatizing and re-traumatizing all over again. And actually, I don't know. You're asking questions of how we decided to start to allow ourselves. To be on cameras and so on, and I can describe it and remember it very well, and I remember what I was thinking back then. But I still don't know, and here is me asking you a question, and not now, definitely not now, but I'm still not sure about the result, meaning I don't know whether this experience, everything you saw back there, all this shame, all this, at some point, immaturity, all this pain and trauma, whether it's useful in some other context. I don't know, because people keep asking me that, and I really don't know, because the 21st century, I think, explained us that never again doesn't work anymore. And I don't know, is it just a piece of art which required a huge amount of work and effort and so on, and Julia did amazing job, but I'm absolutely not sure what's the What's the lesson here? I don't know. And this one is maybe even more painful than just watching it all over again and watching myself on February 24th and watching things I wish never would have seen ever again. So yeah, I'm confused.
I think many people now kind of give up with Russia, and if at first it was like a lot of questions like what's going on, why people don't like to go to the protest, or why they're like so passive. So now I feel like there is not so much interest in this, and this kind of the movie, and to see that actually people still want to know about what's going on inside, and they still care about, and they still like there is an interest. And I think for me the movie is like now I can send like just like a 6 or 7 hours to them and say like, well, you can watch please. But honestly I really appreciate every person who came and watched it, and I will continue to ask all about everything that's going on inside, about those who are in Russia in prison, those who are our colleagues and they're still working inside of Russia anonymously. And yeah, we're just really happy that we still can tell our stories.
It was really nice to see Moscow. We just recently discussed with my wife that we kind of push ourselves to forget Moscow, so it would not hurt that much. But now we like saw it again, and it was great. And I want you all to know that though in this movie, like everyone's leaving, still there are journalists who are working in Russia. They work in very severe conditions, and they work mostly anonymously. They move a lot, and their life and freedom at constant danger, but they choose to continue this work. And many of those journalists are very young people, like really young. And we are very proud that, that next generation is coming and stepping into our shoes and being able to work in the situation which is so hard to work into. So thank you for remembering them.
I think we can take an audience question. So yeah, right here. There's a microphone right behind you coming to you.
The effort that you made to keep broadcasting through Rain TV in these very hard conditions, do you feel today in hindsight that it had an impact on Russian public opinion? Do you feel that you can have it now from exile? And I was very wondering about your husband. Is he still in prison?
I guess Anya could better answer about TV Rain, because I left TV Rain in 2022, already in exile. And about my fiancé, yes, he's still in prison. In 2022, he was sentenced to 22 years in Russian prison.
And Ksenia was there, where in summer.
I visited Russia once. I am in FSB's list of people who they stop on the borderlines, but probably they knew that I'm there only because of him, and I'm only there to visit his court, and I left after, and this was the only one time when I was in Russia after.
And I should add that, yeah, Ksyusha is the only one of our characters who has been back in Russia since, and that was the circumstances.
Also, media where I worked after is also an undesirable media, so it's already impossible to visit him for me.
And regarding TV Rain, we always had this mindset, this idea that whatever happens, you just go to the office, you just go and start working, you just press on record on camera, you just start going on air, and pretty much it is this the same direction. And I won't give you any clear answers right now. I can only ask questions, and I have a lot of them. And as I don't know about this series and what effect they might bring, the same I don't know about getting back to the audience, about getting to the new audience, and about just fighting with the bubble, because definitely we have our audience that is already with us, and we don't need to convince them, and we don't need to make a special effort because we are already speaking the same language. But are we capable of conquering new audiences? Are we able to fight Russian propaganda? I'm not sure, and this problem is still with us. I know there are some things where Russian journalists might be able to do a little bit more than any other journalists now. This is, Russian journalists might be able to get in touch with Russian military guys. And it happens from time to time. It happens not often, but by the way, Olga and Sonia have this example on their podcast. And there is the one language and some trust, and Russian independent journalists from time to time, they get a chance to get in touch with Russian military guys and get some important information and tell the world about it. But otherwise, I don't know. Our audience, our previous audience needs us, and this is a bit of psychotherapeutic function to be with them. We, from time to time, we get a chance to do something like really important, as get some information about Russian military, and in all the other senses, it's just our mindset. Whatever happens, you work, and maybe it's just our habit and not knowing what else to do. I don't know. Maybe it's this way.
And of course, it's also, the thing that's always said is it's impossible to kind of conduct social research and surveys in a totalitarian society. You're not going to get exactly answers, but all of these women continue to work in exile as journalists and continue to do really important work. And you can't necessarily sense the impact, but if you're in a small town somewhere in Russia, or even in a big city somewhere in Russia, you can't talk to your neighbors about what you feel about the war or what you feel about Putin. Your children cannot mention this at school, but you can, read Lena's work, listen to Olga's podcast, listen to Ksyusha's podcast, watch Anya's show, which they all continue to do work. And you feel like you're not alone and you're not crazy. And that is incredibly empowering to have, to just feel, as Hannah Arendt said, totalitarianism feeds on loneliness. And to provide that and make people feel not alone is incredibly important. And I so want to tell you about what they're all doing, but I'm like, do I save it for the exile part? You kind of have to stay tuned, but I'll tell you a little bit. Elena Kostyuchenko has a book that was on the New Yorker top 10 books of last year called I Love Russia. So I recommend you go and buy it and read it. It's great. These are very abbreviated versions. They've all moved countries so many times we can't count. Olga and Sonia have continued to do their podcast, and as Anya mentioned, they had this incredible season last year where they talked to sisters of Russian, the sisters were anti-war, and their brothers had served in you know, they'd gone to Ukraine and fought, and this is like a completely brutal, heart-wrenching podcast series. Ksyusha has a project helping families of political prisoners, hosted a podcast focused on families of political prisoners, also continues to write and has talked to people in Ukraine, and is now attending the New York Film Academy here in New York. Anya continues to be a host at TV Rain and founded the Russian Independent Media Archive, which is preserving 20 years, more than 20 years now, the time keeps going, since Putin's rule of, it's archiving media from the tiny to the huge, which is basically documenting the history of of current Russia and this regime. And it's an incredibly huge project, preserving this documentation. If there's anything you want to add, but I continue to be amazed by these women.
We're out of time, unfortunately, but I would also want to note a couple of things. We're showing the film a couple more times, actually in one sitting.
Oh yeah, we wanted to vote. If you guys were gonna, because we didn't know, I was like, Dennis asked me, how do we show this? I'm like, do we split it in? Would you rather, okay, who would rather see it over 2 days in 2 parts like this? Raise your hands. Who would have rather seen it as a marathon with like snack breaks, a couple of intermissions? Damn, that's kind of even.
No bad way.
There's no bad way, but yes, it's showing again at BAM and here.
And here next weekend. And Julia's coming back to do a talk in a couple of days with Roberto Minervini, and I'm sure she'll talk more about this film, so I encourage you to come for that. And I want to thank you all for your work for this film, for everything. Thank you so much.